Great. Oh, so many friendly faces. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Naomi Meyer, and my talk, like you heard, is Disaster-Ready Cybersecurity Guidelines, Building Resilient Support Systems for Domestic Violence Survivors. And I'm sharing this work from my master's degree at the University of Washington. So go Huskies. Woohoo, UW. Great, so let's see if this works. Woo, okay, it worked. So domestic violence, it's a really heavy subject. I'm gonna try and keep it not too heavy, but I do wanna share this content warning that this is a really sensitive topic, and so thank you all for treating it with sensitivity. And I'm not gonna be sharing any explicit images, but if you're feeling triggered or need to take a break, please take care of yourself. You step outside. This is a safe space, so I really wanna treat this sensitive topic with sensitivity, and thank you all for joining me in creating this safe space. So here's some headlines recently to give you a sense of the problem that I'm talking about. So in pink we have from Think Global Health, gender-based violence, the unseen toll of hurricanes. From the Houston Area Women's Shelter, Hurricane Beryl impacts domestic violence shelter, funds needed for families fleeing violence. And then from the United Nations Women in green, tackling violence against women and girls in the context of climate change. So there are many headlines like this, just a few more examples. We have from the Georgetown Journal of Gender and the Law, immigrant women, domestic violence, and hurricanes Irma and Maria in Puerto Rico compounding the violence for the most vulnerable. There's a TV news story. There's many examples of similar TV news stories of domestic violence causes rise during natural disasters in North Carolina. And then this is from academic peer-reviewed journal of planetary health about extreme events and gender-based violence. So overall, I could share more headlines with you from popular news, media, blogs. Academic peer-reviewed evidence-based research demonstrates overwhelmingly that there is a significant uptick in domestic violence, gender-based violence during hurricanes, natural disasters, floods, especially here in the US. So, big topic, big problem, right? What are we gonna do about it? That's kind of our agenda for today. I'm gonna share who I am, who's on my team, why I think this is so important, what is being done about the problem, and then how you can be part of the solution. So I really want everyone to come away today with some key sort of ideas, thoughts, mental models that you can shift your perspective to think about domestic violence in the context of cybersecurity. And resources if you're interested in helping, because as I've been here, at B-Sides, everyone is super supportive when they hear about my talk and they say, oh yeah, that's important, I want to help. And so I want to give you some resources of how you can contribute to be part of the solution. So overall, my goal is to help build tech to protect those who are most vulnerable online. And I know a lot of people are interested in cybersecurity to protect those most vulnerable online. And particularly domestic violence is a problem that overwhelmingly impacts immigrant populations, people of color, Black, Indigenous, Latina, LGBTQ, vulnerable populations, and particularly in our current political climate, we need all the help we can get. So here's where you can find me online. Like I said, I'm Naomi Meyer, and this is my handle and my website. I would love to continue the conversation online. If you have any feedback, if you have any strong opinions, please feel free to reach out. So this research is ongoing, and it's very much still in development, and so I would love to hear from you all, because I know there's some amazing experts in the room who are really knowledgeable about this topic. So to share some background of why I'm talking about this, why I care, I'm going to share a bit about my journey. So actually my bio on Session Eyes is a little old. So I used to work as a software development engineer at Adobe, And I was there for 5 years, and I learned a lot. It was a great experience. However, at the end of my kind of tenure, there was a reorg, and I was working on some tracking software, the cookie pixel that was tracking users to sell ads online. And I was feeling, in our current political climate, a little bit uneasy about some of that work. And I wanted a chance to kind of question some of the ethical and moral ideas about the technology that I was building. And I felt like, the analogy I like to use is that I felt like I was a mechanic who, a mechanic of the internet or of software, where I know how to open up the hood of the internet and of software and chain out the engine and kind of know how some of the components work. But not all my friends and family and people who I love don't have that mechanic knowledge. And so I feel a responsibility to be intentional and thoughtful about how we're building that technology. I'm seeing some heads nod, so I feel like people understand where I'm coming from. So as sort of a mechanic of the internet, I wanted to be part of the solution. And in our current political climate, I am anti-Trump. And I am anti-fascism. And I want to be, thank you. And I want to be on the right side of history. Thank you, yes. So I wanted to take a pause from big corporate tech and work on something that I thought was meaningful and was unquestionably for good. And so that's where I'm partnering with the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And they are a federally funded national not-for-profit that works all across the United States to support survivors and their families. And they have what's called the Safety Net Project that explores technology safety in the context of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and violence against women. And they have seen a significant uptick in the need for support during natural disasters. And so they reached out to us, graduate students at the University of Washington, and said, hey, can you help us out? And we said, absolutely, we would love to. And so that is what I'm doing sort of my master's thesis or master's capstone project on. And so this is a big project that I could talk your ear off about for hours, but I'm gonna sort of zoom in on some specific content that I thought would be most meaningful for the folks in the room today. And oh yes, so the National Network to End Domestic Violence, they support about 1,000 survivors and their, not 1,000, 1 million. 1 million survivors and their families annually. And then what they do is they work with what they call local victim service providers, so like women's shelters all across the United States, to provide guidance and documentation and kind of key resources. And so, and there's about 2,000 different women's shelters and local victim service providers who they support. So this is a big project that scales all across the United States. And our team is, so I'm sort of when I say we about my project team a lot, these are the people who I have to give a big shout out to. Unfortunately, they're not here today, but my sort of co-students, my classmates for the master's thesis are Dea and Alex. And then Andrew Wolf is our academic advisor from the University of Washington. And then Jessie Lowell, Dr. Jessie Lowell, the brilliant, she is at the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and she has been doing this forever. And so I'm citing a lot of her amazing research. So as part of this project, we've had opportunities to interview experts across the field. And Natalie Dolce is the assistant director of Safe Campus at UW here in Seattle. And she says that domestic violence issues are often tech canaries in the coal mine because they represent how abusers might abuse technology and abuse sort of the latest and greatest new technology immediately. And so because they are these canaries in the coal mine, they're really important to study and to be aware of for tech practitioners in different sort of business cases across the field, because this is sort of how abusers can abuse new tech. And so that's why I think it's really important to study. And something Natalie also talks about is her work at the University of Washington. It has seen a lot of domestic violence abusers are sort of doing similar things that, similar attacks against like researchers and scientists and academics at the university. And so these sort of similar kinds of campaigns to discredit people are seen in these examples. So academic researchers, in particular lately, climate change scientists, reproductive health scientists at UW Medicine, physicians for human rights, journalists, and human rights advocates. I mean, the list goes on. I'm sure you can think of other examples of cases where there are campaigns to discredit this important work. And so that's why it's very important to study and to consider domestic violence in your cybersecurity. So with that in mind, let's move on to some examples. So we talked about sort of the who and the why. So now let's transition into the what and the how. So again, like I said, this is a big master's project that expands across lots of domains. And we're particularly focused on providing guidance for the survivors and in women's shelters in local victim service providers. And so I didn't think that that content would be as useful for you all as more kind of practitioners in the cybersecurity field who are more private sector. And so I want to provide some sort of examples that might open your mind, and I'm hoping that you can think more broadly about domestic violence cases in your cybersecurity work. So I'm going to go into that first with threat modeling, and then location tracking, and then end with non-consensual intimate image abuse. So let's talk about threat modeling. I know many of you are experts in threat modeling and do it in your domains at your big tech companies, and so I won't tell you what it is, but at a high level, it's a structured approach for identifying, analyzing, and mitigating potential security threats to systems and applications, often, right? And so sort of the traditional systems-focused definition of threat modeling, examples like the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or the Microsoft Stride framework, follow this threat model where the goal is to improve the security posture for the organization, to reduce risk, and increase cost effectiveness for the company, right? So there's some researchers out there who are advocating to kind of challenge this traditional systems-focused definition of threat modeling to instead think more deeply about the actual human involved. So the survivor, the person impacted by the threat, right? And so there's some really fascinating research, and this is a huge paper that I would love to talk your ear off about later. But it's called Threat Modeling Intimate Partner Violence, Tech Abuse as a Cybersecurity Challenge, particularly in the Internet of Things. And so these scholars have a shift from the conventional technical focus as a risk to systems, instead toward risks to people, to the humans who are impacted. And so to do a full threat model, and this is their example of a tech abuse threat model from their paper, and they talk about ownership, harmful messages, exposures of information, and gaslighting as some ways to threat model an attack. Similarly, there's other research. This paper is called Threat Me Rights, a human harms threat model for technical systems. And so this human harms model goes over harassment, access, restrictions, manipulation, and surveillance as things that you can threat model for, right? And focus more on the human instead of the sort of corporate business loss, right? And so these researchers say that the existing models, like we talked about, are coverage of technical threats to technical systems, but these tools do not always apply in interpersonal abuse situations, where an abuser may be using technology as intended, but in a way that inflicts harm to another. And so instead, interpersonal abuse poses a threat to users instead of the system. So this causes issues when attempting to threat model around non-technical adversaries. So I want to kind of challenge you all to think about threat modeling as a human-centered strategy, right? And so I'm sure many of you have heard of human-centered design. So I want to add human-centered threat modeling because interpersonal abuse poses a threat to users instead of a threat to the system. And providing more comprehensive coverage where the technology is working as intended, but there's still a threat is the goal. So let's move on to location tracking. Another hot topic. I'm sure, as everyone in security already knows, there's a lot of risks to some existing location tracking technologies. And so there's cars, airtags, pet finder. There's a long list of examples of ways that attackers can abuse this technology. And so to go over the example of threat modeling as a human-based approach, we're going to focus on Apple AirTags. Sounds good? Okay, great. So here's some recent press of examples. We have Apple AirTag stalking led to ruin and murder. Lawsuit says how Apple AirTag is fueling domestic violence. And I know you've been digital spying and divorce in the smartphone era from NPR. Similarly, police records show women are being stalked with Apple AirTag across the country. And from local, the Seattle Journal of Technology, Environmental, and Innovation Law, unintended consequences, the impact of Apple AirTags on vulnerable populations. So big problem. So I'm going to go through an example scenario where we can kind of use our human-centered threat modeling for the Apple AirTag problem. And this example scenario comes from unwanted tracking scenarios implications for the DOLT protocol design from researchers Maggie and Jesse. And in the interest of time, I won't read it out loud to you, but please read through this example scenario. There's another one here where a survivor cannot use tech to scan for location trackers or receive alerts. And so this is an example where lime and lemon, I don't have time to read it all, but this is an example of a domestic violence case with an Apple AirTag. And so we can threat model this example where we have the attacker profile and the victim profile and other characteristics of this Apple AirTag abuse. And the great thing about this research is that they have a solution. And so Maggie and Jesse are working with the Internet Engineering Task Force, the folks who brought us TCP/IP, and they have a working group on detecting unwanted location trackers, or DULT. And so this is their working group GitHub, and I think they're doing really important work. And this DULT method basically improves the problem of Apple AirTags with a domestic violence focus. And yeah, please check them out. So to move on, sorry, I'm talking your ear off, and I'm so excited. I'm running through my time. But we've got non-consensual intimate image abuse, or NCII. And so there are some really amazing nonprofit tools available. And these are also, a lot of them have open source. And so if you're interested in contributing to improve these tools, please check them out. First, we have Stop NCII, and they are help with the removal of intimate images and revenge porn from the internet. And then the Internet Watch Foundation helps with the removal of images and child sexual abuse online. And then takeitdown.org is a service provided by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and it removes explicit images from minors on the internet. And so as a techie, I think that their technology is really interesting, and so I wanted to share it with you all because I thought you might find it interesting as well. But at a high level, how it works is instead of sharing the intimate image that, or the revenge porn that survivors don't want shared, what survivors can do is upload the image, and the service generates a hash, a cryptographic hash of the image or video, and then sends that out to partners like Instagram, Facebook, etc. And then they can, if there is an exact match with that hash, they will remove the image. Yeah, that's what that says. And so I think it's really great to generate that cryptographic hash, and they're doing amazing work. However, there are some sophisticated attackers who could just change 1 pixel of the image, and then it's a different hash, and so it's not an exact match. And so we need experts like you to help contribute to improve this technology to make it more effective to support survivors. Again, here's more resources. Here's their global network of partners. Here in North America, they also have international partners. And please check them out and support them online. And thank you so much. I hope that you've expanded your mind a bit and thought more deeply about how we can build tech for good to protect those who are most vulnerable online. So thank you so much. This is, again, where you can find me online. I really appreciate it.